Comrades. Today we advance into the third level of the Russian conspiracy iceberg. As you can see, we are not even halfway there yet, but we are already approaching the point where most of the theories are not so well known to the general public. However, the craziest stuff is yet to come. Today you'll find out what is hidden in the vast swamps of the far north, how the president of Russia was replaced in 1996, and whether the cradle of the Slavs is near Chelyabinsk. Let's go. Swamp mechanisms. A theory that arose from the story of an anonymous user of a Russian image board. In his dream, he saw huge rotating mechanisms hidden in deep swamps somewhere in the middle of the taiga, causing an eerie anxiety when approaching them. The thread was immediately joined by other people who had seen something similar, and the topic became quite popular on the Russian-speaking internet. There were even some people claiming that their distant relatives had worked in the far north in special military units located to protect these systems back in the Soviet times. Allegedly, in the swamps of the Kola Peninsula, the Komi Republic and the Arkhangelsk region, there are huge ancient mechanisms protected by the government, and some kind of research is conducted there. These mechanisms are millions of years old, and despite the fact that they look like a jumble of huge gears, pistons and springs, they are actually alive and have a certain ability to influence the living organisms around them. Perhaps these gears are just the above-ground part of some huge living organism living under the vast surface of the northern bogs. Some people believe that these mechanisms, or their owner, suck the happiness out of people, to the point where many of the soldiers guarding them can't stand it and voluntarily give up their lives to avoid being near them. Letters of Yevgeny Petrov. Yevgeny Petrov was a Soviet writer, author of the famous novels 12 Chairs and The Golden Calf, who died in a plane crash during World War II. He had a strange hobby. He sent letters to different countries of the world to non-existent addresses, then waited for them to return and collected envelopes with the inscription "Addressee not found" in different languages. And there is a legend that in April 1939 Petrov sent a letter to New Zealand to Merrill Eugene Wesley to a fictitious address, the town of Hybertville, 7 Wright Beach Street, in which he wrote a couple of sentences he had made up about his visit to New Zealand. Imagine his surprise when he received not an envelope with the usual inscription, but a full-fledged benevolent reply which sustained the conversation as if the events described by Petrov had really happened. But the strangest thing was not the letter, but the photograph attached to it. On it was the writer himself, happily embracing the New Zealand sender. Yevgeny Petrov had never been to New Zealand and did not know anyone who could have written such lines. Moreover, the date on which the photograph was taken coincided with the date on which he had been hospitalized in a near-death state due to pneumonia a year earlier. And in 1942, on the day when the airplane with Petrov, who worked as a frontline correspondent, was shot down by the Germans in the Rostov region, his wife allegedly received another letter from the same New Zealander with the words, "You said you were destined to crash in an airplane, not drown. Please be careful, Yevgeny. Fly as little as possible." A short movie based on the story was made with Kevin Spacey in the lead role. Whether there is any truth to this story, of course, we will never know. Подсчитинивание. Подсчитинивание is a word that is difficult to translate into English. It would be something like under-bristling. It refers to a practice that existed among Eurasian nomads who cut the skin on the feet of their captives and put horsehair or pig bristles there. After healing, the captive could not walk normally and accordingly could not run away, and therefore there was no need to guard him. The only conspiracy here is that historians argue whether such method existed in reality or if it was invented by chroniclers for demonization of Tatar Mongols later. Paul I was not the Tsar's son. Paul I is remembered in Russian history for being extremely disliked by his relatives. He was killed after a palace coup which his son Alexander I knew about. Well, and the childhood of the Tsar passed without maternal love, because he was a child born to Catherine the Great from an unloved husband, to please Yelizaveta Petrovna. This husband quickly died, and Catherine subsequently ruled for more than 30 years. By the way, when she came to the throne in 1762, the army and the people swore not only to her, but also to Paul. However, shortly after, his name disappeared from all official documents of Catherine's reign. Catherine II did not transfer power to her son even when he grew up and married at her behest in 1773. Catherine did not even involve her son in a discussion of politics, deliberately keeping him at a distance from state affairs. It would seem to sound relatively logical, though cruel. Paul reminded Catherine of a husband she hated. But the fact is that there is still no consensus on who the real father of Paul I was. Doubts that it was Peter III, Catherine's husband, are due to the fact that he suffered from phimosis in his youth, and before the operation was not capable of sexual activity. Therefore, there was speculation that the real father of Paul I was Catherine's first lover, Sergei Saltykov. Their romance lasted from 1752 to 1754. During this time, the Grand Duchess became pregnant 3 times, and this was after 9 years of infertile marriage, until finally, after 2 miscarriages, she gave birth to a son. Immediately after the birth of Paul, Saltykov was sent as ambassador to Sweden, then to Hamburg, and for the rest of his life, Catherine did not allow him to come close to the court, but she kept up a correspondence with him. However, if that's the case, then the hatred of Catherine towards her son is quite baffling. She apparently liked his actual father well enough. Also, when looking at the portraits of Peter and Paul, you can really see the family resemblance. Slightly more logical is the version that Paul was not the son of Catherine. In the materials for the biography of Emperor Paul I, published in the 19th century in Germany, it was reported that allegedly a dead child was born from Saltykov, which was then replaced by some random Chukhonsky boy. That is, Paul I is not only not the son of his parents, but not even Russian. But this is most likely just a speculation. Orb near Dubna. There are a lot of hypotheses about the origin of the mysterious huge white orb with the height of a 5-story building, hidden in the middle of the forest on the outskirts of the Tveri region. How it appeared there, what it was intended for, who built it. According to the most likely version of the ball's origin, it is a radio-transparent dome of the Soviet command and measurement system Kub-U, installed at one of the command centers in the town of Sholkovo near Moscow to control spacecraft. In 1980 it was replaced by a newer system, and in the same year a mysterious orb appeared in the forest near Dubna, which is about 130 kilometers from Sholkovo. According to another version, a military base was going to be built near the village of Ignatovo as the third ring of Moscow's air defense. However, why would a military base need a huge concrete ball? There are several other versions. Some believe that acoustic weapons were tested here to disperse demonstrations. Others claim that the object was dropped during transportation. Inside, the sphere is spacious, there is a large ground area when you can walk around experimenting with sound and echo, which sounds completely unreal and fantastic. Well, the sad thing is, the orb is gone. In 2014, a photo shoot with the car was set up inside the sphere. In order to get the car inside, a large hole was sawed in it, presumably breaking the structure of the object. In the winter of 2021, when the weather abruptly changed, the orb fractured and broke in two. Shaitan Kol. And again a story about lakes from Central Asia, this time from Kazakhstan. One of the most mysterious lakes in Kazakhstan, Shaitan Kol, which means Devil's Lake in Kazakh, still frightens the locals. Shaitan Kol is a mountain lake that resembles a deep bowl filled with black and sometimes bright blue water. No birds or animals can be found around the lake for several hundred meters, locals say. People do not swim in this lake and do not take water from it. Scientists have not yet been able to determine the depth of the mysterious lake. The lake is closed and obtains its water just from snow, but the water level does not change ever. It is not affected by snowy winters or periods of drought. Esotericists talk about a portal to the parallel world through its double bottom. Folk legends tell of a coven of devils, dancing mermaids, and ghosts of two lovers. There are 3 popular legends about the lake. According to the first one, the Kazakh Khanate was losing a war to the Jungars. Batirs began to beg God to protect the settlements and for this purpose to turn the dead warriors into rocks. The Almighty heeded the pleas, so the rocks grew, and when the mothers of the dead warriors began to mourn them, their tears filled up an entire lake. According to the second legend, the son of a poor man, Altai, fell in love with the daughter of a rich bai. The girl reciprocated, but her father wanted to marry her off to another man. The young people decided to run away. Some say that the girl fell into the water and drowned, and Altai went after her. Others say that they were called by mermaids, and since then their ghosts are sometimes seen at the lake at night. The third legend tells how they tried to make Devil's Lake holy. In 1905, Bishop Mikhail from Omsk came to Karkarolinsk. The townspeople appealed to him with a request to exorcise the evil and sanctify the lake. The priest performed rites and ordered to install a marble cross on the shore of the lake, which he called the Holy Lake. Soon the cross collapsed into the water and to this day remains at the bottom. The new name of the lake did not take root either. Station 992 MKV. Another modern urban legend, this time from the series of so-called deadly files. These are pictures, videos, audio recordings, music and video games, viewing or listening to which can cause harm to a person's health and life. So, Station 92 MKV is a video that allegedly appeared on the internet around 2011. The video itself was less than a minute long, and it showed a creature unknown to science descending from the roof of a Perm high-rise building on long extending limbs. The video was of abominable quality, but the creature in the video was dubbed as a walking stick because of the shape resembling this insect. The mystery of the story is that sometime between 2012 and 2014, the video suddenly disappeared from the internet, literally from everywhere. Some attributed it to the special services, others tried to justify it by the poor quality of the video itself. But the fact remains that the video could not be found in the public domain, the only thing left of it were these 3 photos. One could also assume that the video didn't exist at all, and those who say that they saw it are just trolls on the internet. If it weren't for one thing, I personally saw this video back in 2011, and I didn't find it that interesting at that time. But when I remembered it again 5-6 years later and realized that it was impossible to find it on the internet, I must admit I did shit a few bricks. However, later on, 2 different videos called Station 992 appeared on YouTube, and what happens in them really resembles what was in the original video. But for some reason I still think that these videos are not the ones I saw more than 10 years ago. Rybnikov was right. Yuri Stepanovich Rybnikov is a Russian scientist and professor who became famous on the internet thanks to his theory that in ancient times in Russia people counted from 1 to 10, not 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on, but in some more sophisticated way. Зира, целковый, полушка, четвертушка, осьмушка, пудовичок, медичок, серебрячок, золотничок, девятичок, десятичок. All these names sound so absurd that it's even hard for me to translate it into English, to be honest. In the scientific community, Rybnikov was considered a freak, as he claimed that mathematics is a completely falsified science. At the same time, he constantly appeared on TV, in particular giving an interview with the title "Science as a Means of Zombifying the Inhabitants of the Earth." By the way, Rybnikov was a big fan of the theory of the existence of ancient roosters. Yes, the same ones who fought the lizards from Nibiru. Friar Avel. Friar Avel is also known as Russian Nostradamus. This Orthodox friar, according to some sources, predicted a number of historical events in the second half of the 18th and subsequent centuries, including the dates and circumstances of the deaths of Russian autocrats, beginning with Catherine II, social upheavals and wars. Legends about him appeared somewhere at the end of the 19th century, and almost no official documents about the life of Friar Avel have survived. To be more precise, there is one. On March 7th, 1796, the Ministry of Justice of the Russian Empire opened a case of a peasant named Vasily Vasilyev, who called himself Avel, and of a book he had written on 67 pages. He was accused of distributing the Book of Prophecies. What did he foretell? That Catherine will rule for 40 years, that under Alexander I the French will burn Moscow, the throne of Nicholas II will collapse on the eve of victory, and civil war will begin. That after him will come a bald man with an axe, apparently Lenin. Well, after 7 decades of desolation, demons will leave Russia, which is just about the amount of years the USSR existed. Also, recently his prophecy about 3 Vladimirs has become popular. To one Bogatyr is served, the second will be born on one day and will be honored on another. You can easily guess that Prince Vladimir the Great is the first one, Lenin, whose date of birth April 10 because of the calendar reform shifted by 12 days, is the second. The third Vladimir bears the mark of destiny, and the salvation and happiness of Russia lies with him. I wonder who he may be. Igor Goffman. Igor Goffman is another Russian-speaking video blogger who became famous thanks to his, let's be frank, mental illness. He believes that his life is basically the plot of the movie The Truman Show. Since his birth, Igor Avralovich has lived with actors, and an endless spectacle is played out around him, during which one group of persons endlessly adopts the images of everyone surrounding him. The ambulance doctor is the neighbor who called the ambulance, and his mom is the 17-year-old girl he sees in the yard. His relatives and KGB officers are constantly watching him. In short, the whole world around him is not real, and is aimed solely at bullying him. While Igor considers everyone around him to be hired actors, he himself is practically the messiah, the creator of more than 84 countries and cities that have appeared in the world in recent years. Igor was active on the internet and kept both a text blog and a video blog. He has more than 38,000 subscribers, even though no videos have been posted there for 8 years. But memes with him are still being made today. Slavik Chebarkulsky. Vyacheslav Krasheninnikov was a Russian boy from the town of Chebarkul who died at the age of 10 from leukemia. After his death, his mother, Valentina Krasheninnikova, began a campaign to recognize Vyacheslav as a healer and soothsayer who continues to perform miracles even after his death. Several books have been written about him, mostly again either by his mother or from his mother's words. These books contain numerous accounts of the boy's unusual qualities and abilities, of his posthumous apparitions, and of the miracles he performed. Allegedly at the age of 4, when the family lived in the GDR, the boy received a concussion, after which it is believed he began to prophesy, heal diseases and read minds. At the age of 8, Slavik visited the Trinity Love of Saint Sergius, and the elder Naum there called the boy a saint. After that, the mass pilgrimage of sufferers from all over the USSR began. Slavik's mother recounted that her son did not like school, saying that they taught lies, and constantly said that he could read other people's thoughts at a distance, even presidents. He predicted the imminent coming of God to Earth, and said that he was not quite an ordinary child from his birth. When you find out who I really am, you will first be very frightened that you treated me so casually, and then you will be proud of me. Slavik, according to his mother's stories, also stated the exact time of his illness and death. After Slavik's death, hundreds of people come to the local cemetery every year. It is believed that not only Slavik's grave heals from illnesses, but also the soil from it. At the same time, Slavik allegedly predicted 9/11, the emergence of the new world currency which will be called Euro, COVID-19, as well as the end of the world after the war between China, Russia and America, when all the water on Earth will be colored red. Until 2010, books and brochures about Slavik were distributed through the official church book network. But then the Publishing Council of the Russian Orthodox Church banned the sale of this literature, and the church officially began to evaluate Slavik as a false saint. Yeltsin died in 1996. Once again, my favorite Boris Nikolaevich, and once again a story about his 1996. No, this time no one fell off a bridge and Bill Clinton did not rig the election. It's just that it was no longer Boris Yeltsin, but his doppelganger who went on to a second presidential term. According to this theory, Russian President Boris Yeltsin died during a heart operation back in 1996, and subsequently his double or several doubles took his place, while the cover was carried out by the so-called family, that is, Yeltsin's closest entourage. The main author of the theory and its active propagandist is opposition politician and publicist Yuri Mukhin, who published these hypotheses in the newspapers Duel and Zavtra in 1997. According to him, Yeltsin died on June 26, 1996 after his 5th heart attack. or in the fall during heart surgery. As proof of this theory, references are given to the official photographic portrait of Yeltsin, where he is shown with fingers on his hand. As is known, he lost several fingers on his hand as a child during a grenade explosion. It is claimed that Yeltsin's doppelganger had his fingers amputated after this blunder. Mukhin also claims that the double did not have the same ear shape as the original Yeltsin. Moreover, in 1998, the State Duma seriously considered creating a commission to investigate a potential presidential switch. State Duma Deputy Alexander Sali sent a request to the Prosecutor General in which he pointed out that there were all signs that Yeltsin's doppelgangers had been used in 1996. Oddities in the inauguration procedure: there are almost no photos of the inauguration, and those that are available are taken from the back of the head. The absence of any foreign delegations at the event, and the very fact that Yeltsin was able to undergo heart surgery with the state of his liver. 168 deputies voted in favor of the inclusion in the agenda, out of necessary 226 votes. In fact, there is a grain of common sense in this theory. For the entire second half of 1996, after the operation, Yeltsin very rarely appeared in public, and in rare photos people noted that the president had clearly gained a few kilograms during the time in the hospital. And in the following year, 1997, the public was introduced to a completely different president, who only remotely resembled the country's leader. Boris Yeltsin, or the man who pretended to be the president, visibly lost weight, slimmed down, and his face acquired pointed features. In 1998, Yeltsin was different again. The skin of his face and neck was visibly tightened, the bags under his eyes were removed, and his skin color was that of a healthy man. This did not fit with the image of the past. The whole country knew that his history of alcoholism could be measured in decades. According to another version, the real Yeltsin was still alive, but weakened greatly after the same heart surgery, and therefore for the sake of various celebrations they tried not to bother him and used doppelgangers instead. It is still impossible to prove the existence of Boris Yeltsin's doppelgangers with any documents. All either because the security service are too good at covering their tracks, or because there were never any doppelgangers. Ryzhkov blizzard. Residents of Vorkuta are rarely surprised by severe frosts. They are used to constant sub-zero temperatures. Winter there lasts 8 to 9 months. But there are cataclysms that surprise even them. The blizzard that hit Vorkuta in early February 1990 did not fit into any rules. Many people learned about the scale of the disaster and its possible consequences only a few years later. But the city could really just die in a matter of days. The disaster hit the city unexpectedly. By 6 p.m. the wind was blowing at a speed of 50 meters per second. In bad weather, the city headquarters as a rule stopped the movement of public transport. Citizens were warned about the blizzard through the radio. But on February 8, 1990, the order was not given in time. Passenger buses took to the routes and got stuck on the highway when the wind gusts reached maximum strength. Just a few minutes and traffic came to a complete standstill. The temperature dropped to minus 35 degrees. Visibility was zero. Frostbitten people began to be brought to the local hotel. But the worst thing is that the disaster destroyed the city's power supply and damaged the lines that fed the local water supply. Vorkuta's power plant number 1 was without water and electricity, and all mines around Vorkuta went into emergency mode. Why was this blizzard called the Ryzhkov blizzard? It's simple. It fell on the city exactly when the head of the USSR Council of Ministers, Nikolai Ryzhkov, arrived there. It was he who personally had to command the operation to save the city. The search for broken power supply wires went on all night, but without success. In conditions of zero visibility and the strongest wind, it was impossible to find the damaged pieces of equipment. In the morning of February 9th, because of the extreme conditions, it was decided to shut down the second Vorkuta power plant. The local authorities admitted to Ryzhkov that the situation was not under control, and if the power lines were not fixed during the remaining daylight hours, the entire city would have to be prepared for evacuation. Only in the evening of February 9th, the breakage of the electric line was finally found and eliminated. The supply of heat and electricity to the houses was resumed, accidents at coal mines were avoided, and Ryzhkov safely flew to Thailand for his planned visit. Where is the conspiracy here, you ask? Well, you know, the second most important person in the USSR comes to visit, and in the same hour an unprecedented blizzard starts. Of course, it was a test of the latest climate weapon on the part of the Americans. Talkov's murder. And again to the high-profile murders of the 90s. This crime is still considered the most notorious in the history of Russian show business, and the course of its investigation raises many questions. Despite the fact that at the time of Talkov's death there were only a few people near him, investigators were unable to solve the case and find the killer. On October 6, 1991, the Yubileyny Sports Palace in St. Petersburg hosted a star-studded concert featuring most of the country's popular performers. Igor Talkov was scheduled to go on stage at 16:20 and singer Aziza was to perform before him. But then her lover, Igor Malakhov, decided to intervene in the matter as he wanted to get his lady of the heart a more honorable place, closer to the finale of the concert, switching her performance with Talkov's. He came to Talkov's dressing room. Talkov took the offer calmly, but the singer's director Valery Shlyafman, who joined the group in the late summer of 1991, was outraged by it. Talkov's bodyguards threw Malakhov out into the hallway, where a fight broke out, resulting in Malakhov pulling out his nagan, and Talkov pulling out his gas pistol and running after him. What happened in that corridor is still unknown. It is only known that there were 3 bullets in the nagan. 2 bullets hit the walls, but the 3rd bullet went straight into the chest of Talkov, who died on the spot. The mysteries begin next. The obvious suspect, Malakhov, ran away, but 10 days later he turned himself in. After questioning Malakhov, the investigators released him on his own recognizance. After a number of examinations and interviews with witnesses, the investigators were forced to admit that Malakhov had nothing to do with singer's death. At the time of the shot he was lying on the floor and Talkov was shot by someone standing up. The story of the murder weapon is also surprising. It was taken by Talkov's director Shlyafman, hidden in a toilet bowl of the dressing room, which Aziza saw, took it away, gave it to Malakhov, who dismantled it and threw it into the river, allegedly so that he would not be charged with illegal possession and carrying of weapons. Accordingly, it was Shlyafman who became the second suspect. On his clothes they found traces of gunpowder and drops of blood belonging to Igor Talkov, which is logical if they were all near each other during the scuffle. But Shlyafman fled to Israel 6 months later and has not appeared in Russia since. In general, it looks like an accidental murder, but not everyone believes it. The fact is that a month before his death, Talkov constantly received threats on the phone, which is why he began to carry a gas pistol. And his son recalled that a week before his death, Talkov shouted into the phone to someone, "Why are you bothering me? I have about a month to live." Allegedly, he had conflicts with movie producers associated with the criminal world. There was also a version that the singer was shot by a sniper hiding behind the scenes who took advantage of the turmoil. The KGB was also linked to the murder of Talkov because he often sang on political topics. Dissatisfied with his anti-Soviet creativity, the security services decided to eliminate the enemy of the state by order of the country's leadership. And on the opposite, a version that Russian nationalists killed Talkov to then make him a patriot martyr. The fate of 3 bodyguards of Igor Talkov who were with him that night turned out to be strange too. One was killed in a fight in a restaurant, the second was found under the windows of his apartment with a severed index finger, and the third is still in hiding and lives under an assumed name. He had several attempts on his life, including stabbed in the stomach, but he survived. The murder case remains unsolved. Anti-Earth. Again, a rather global theory that somewhere in the shadow of our planet or on the opposite point of the Earth's orbit exists its dark twin brother. Everything is exactly the same as on Earth there, but inverted. The planet doppelganger, the so-called Gloria, was sought even by the priests of ancient Egypt. According to their worldview, each person at birth is endowed with some astral double, and these doubles lived on Gloria. Since then, this theory was periodically discussed even in the circles of prominent astronomers of the modern era. In Russia, this theory had many admirers, including quite respected professors of astrophysics. Unfortunately, so far there is not a single proof of the existence of such a planet. Yaponchik is Patriarch Kirill. Another crazy replacement theory that almost everyone in Russia has heard. Vyacheslav Kirillovich Ivankov, also known as Yaponchik, was a Soviet and Russian criminal and thief-in-law, the leader of one of Moscow's organized crime groups. He was considered one of the most influential criminals in Russia. He died in 2009 as a result of peritonitis after an assassination attempt by a sniper. But there is a theory that this assassination attempt and death were staged, and Yaponchik then became Patriarch Kirill of the Russian Orthodox Church. And yes, I certainly do not believe in it. All this is a fruit of crazy fantasy which I in no way support. I do not want to offend anyone's feelings, just retelling some schizo rambling from the internet. So, first of all, if you look at their photos, they do look alike. Secondly, Yaponchik's patronymic is Kirillovich. Thirdly, Patriarch Kirill ascended to his throne in 2009, just in the year of Yaponchik's death. Fourthly, the interview of the alleged future patriarch in 1989 is circulating, and this person does not resemble Kirill of today at all. Next, after the assassination attempt, Yaponchik lived another month, and then suddenly fell into a coma and died of peritonitis another month later. Suspicious. Finally, Yaponchik was buried in a closed coffin, and nobody saw him dead. In general, the theory is interesting, and as far as I know, it is insanely popular in Russian prisons. Every second person believes in it. But there are actually a lot of inconsistencies. If you look at the photos of the future patriarch Kirill from 1994 to 2010, there is no sudden change. His eyes also don't look Asian in most of the photos, and the rest coincides with a very big stretch. Although, perhaps as I have already said, both special services and criminal authorities are very good at hiding their secrets. Arkaim. In 1987, at the confluence of the Utyaganka and Balshaya Karaganka rivers in the Chelyabinsk region, an archaeological expedition discovered traces of an ancient settlement. Graveyards, remains of defensive structures and chariots. The settlement turned out to be about 4,000 years old, and the city itself was very clearly planned and represented two rings fitted together. The peculiarities of houses in Arkaim are also interesting. The architectural style is almost unique. Here they built dwelling anthills, not freestanding houses as in most other cultures. Since the early 1990s, Arkaim has become very popular among esotericists. It is called a place of power, the city of the sun, the ancestral home of the Aryans, the cradle of human civilization, the birthplace of Zarathustra, and so on. Based on the skulls found, scientists determined that the settlers belonged to the Caucasian race and came to Arkaim most likely from modern Turkey through the Caucasus. The question was, where did the thousands of ancients who inhabited these lands go? They built so many things that they could not voluntarily leave these places. There are bones and burial mounds everywhere. An unknown virus killed them all, or maybe something even more terrible. There are theories that Arkaim was burned by the inhabitants themselves. Why? According to one version, they were fire worshippers. According to another, so that their houses would not be obtained by intruders. Scientists believe that the Arkaim inhabitants simply left. But why they did it, there is still no answer to the question. Well, no answer from the scientists. Neo-pagans obviously knew everything. Arkaim was the refuge of the secret lost knowledge of the Magi, the observatory. The city was inhabited by Slavic Aryans, a wise and developed civilization. Arkaim is a native place of force, a primordial home of Rus, from where all Slavic peoples have left and have settled all over Europe. Allegedly, they have left behind some Slavic Vedas, a set of rules of life and secrets of the universe for their descendants, but nobody has found them yet. Patriarch's Ponds. Patriarch's Ponds is the name of a small neighborhood almost in the center of Moscow, whose main attraction is, you guessed it, ponds. Since the 20th century, this neighborhood has had a certain mystical aura, which has been noted by famous writers. For example, Mikhail Bulgakov's famous novel The Master and Margarita begins at the Patriarch's Ponds. This is where Voland first appears in Moscow. This area used to be called Goat Swamps. According to legend, the unaccustomed souls of people who were once sacrificed in this place annoyed the living people. In ancient times, there were bloody temples where pagan priests practiced their rituals here. Sometimes the rites were very cruel, the victims' heads were cut off, and the muddy sludge of the swamp has forever hidden the traces of monstrous crimes. The mystical halo of Patriarch's ponds is also connected with the fact that, according to legends, people tried to destroy the local brook Chertari feeding the ponds several times, but no one ever succeeded. The swamps were drained, the brook itself was filled with sand and earth, but it survived. The ancestors saw something eerie, something beyond comprehension in this fact, and thought that this quality was coming from some clearly not divine forces. This attitude was supposedly passed on to the ponds. Also, animals have allegedly been afraid to approach the pond for centuries and avoid it. Dogs walking with their owners near the pond turn away from it, and if you bring them closer to the water, they start whining back to get back on the path or try to snuggle up to their owners. There is also a legend about a boy who wanted to swim across the pond on a bed, but in the middle of it, something pulled him under the water and his body was never found. People who lived in the 1930s said that in those days there was a gang of con artist hypnotizers on Patriarch's ponds. Criminals hung around this popular place, Soviet artists, poets and painters gathered there, put passers-by into a trance and robbed and sometimes killed them. Perhaps it was these swindlers who inspired Bulgakov to choose the location for the plot of The Master and Margarita, as well as for the description of the performance played out by Voland in the novel. Mushroom Elves. Mushroom Elves is a rather amusing youth organization that emerged from a small group of role players and existed in St. Petersburg in the 1990s. Their emblem is a black flag with the representative of the genus Psilocybe similanceta. That is, as you understand, their main activity was the use of psilocybin mushrooms and after that participation in some performances or trolling other role-playing communities. The funny thing is that they positioned themselves as anarchists, and in general they were quite an asocial movement, but they were also engaged in socially beneficial activities. At the end of the 90s they realized that their favorite forest with their favorite mushrooms could be littered and destroyed, and so they stood up for nature protection. They even organized armed patrols of several nature reserves near St. Petersburg and fiercely fought poachers. Their methods were quite radical and therefore effective. The image was so strange that many considered their very existence an urban legend, but it was a real-life collective. Since 2003, the Mushroom Elves have acted only as a creative group, not actively involved in public or political activities. But in general, a group of role-playing hooligans, alcoholics and drug addicts, zealously defending nature for the safety of their favorite hallucinogenic mushrooms, you must agree, it was funny. Third one from Garadok. Garadok is a satirical TV program that was aired on television from 1993 to 2012. In each episode, Ilya Aleynikov and Yuri Stoyanov performed humorous sketches that mocked everyday life and the surrounding reality of Russia. The program was iconic for a whole generation of people, and a few years ago an interesting theory appeared on the internet. It all started with a creepypasta published in 2012, the author of which claimed that Garadok originally had 3 actors. The author came across old pilot episodes of the show and remembered that in his childhood he saw the trio of actors, not just Aleynikov and Stoyanov. But the young man was alarmed by the fact that he could not find any information about the actor who left the program on the web, and his parents could not remember the mysterious third man. After unsuccessful attempts to find answers in the official archives, the author of the creepypasta turned for help to piracy, downloaded the very first episode of Garadok to count the number of actors. There were 2 of them. But at the very end of the series he saw the name Vladislav Petrenko in the credits, which was an ammonia frame. He began to dig deeper and found people online who confirmed that in the first episode of Garadok, released on March 25, 1993, there were 3 main characters. These people even provided the author with a recording of this episode. This episode actually featured the very man, Vladislav Petrenko, except that he looked extremely depressed. He was joking, acting well, but it was obvious that something was upsetting him. The most surprising thing was that Stoyanov and Aleynikov changed their attitude towards their colleague during the episode. Sometimes they behaved normally, and sometimes it was as if they stopped noticing him at all. There was a sketch where Stoyanov was sitting in some restaurant talking with Aleynikov. Petrenko approached them and says something. Stoyanov turns to the camera and says, "Looks like we have a third wheel." The author claims that at the very end of the episode, over the credits, he heard the voices of the actors. They were arguing and insisted that Petrenko was not needed in the show, while Vladislav begged them not to kick him out. Next on the screen froze a photo of the newspaper from March 28, 1993. It depicted the news. Actor Vladislav Petrenko took his own life. This creepypasta became very popular and even acquired some details. People found Petrenko's party ticket, his photos, and even talked to his neighbors who really remembered such a person. Even a house register book was found, which was provided by an acquaintance of the actor. According to it, Vladislav Petrenko died on March 30, 1993. Yuri Stoyanov, Aleynikov died in 2012, still denies everything and becomes extremely hostile when someone mentions this theory. Perhaps he is just fed up with young creepypasta devotees. Or perhaps they really have something to hide. Bulgakov and Gogol. Since you've brought up Patriarch Spawns, it would be wrong not to tell you about another conspiracy theory connected with Mikhail Bulgakov. More precisely about his connection with Nikolai Gogol, another great Russian writer who lived 100 years before him. Both were born in what is now Ukraine, they both disliked St. Petersburg, finished their major books in Moscow and burned their manuscripts there, and both also suffered greatly before their deaths. But the story is about the meetings which Bulgakov himself recounted. In 1918, Bulgakov, being a doctor, did surgery on a child, accidentally cut himself with a scalpel and contracted diphtheria. After he injected himself with serum, he was pierced by a sharp pain, and the writer was forced to inject himself with morphine for anesthesia. After several injections of morphine, Bulgakov became addicted. One day, exhausted Bulgakov lay down on the sofa and fell into slumber. This is where Gogol came to him for the first time. It is not known whether it was a dream or a hallucination, but this event made a huge impression on Bulgakov. He decided to end his addiction once and for all. The second meeting was on the streets of Moscow. Bulgakov saw a short, sharp-nosed man in a black coat who silently pointed to a mansion nearby. As it turned out, it was home to Yelena Sergeyevna Shilovskaya and her husband. She later became not only Bulgakov's wife, but also the prototype of Margarita from his most famous novel. For the third time, Gogol appeared to Bulgakov in a dream again. They argued heatedly about something, after which Bulgakov uttered the phrase, "Gogol, cover me with your granite overcoat." Bulgakov even wrote it down in his diary afterwards. After the death of the writer, Bulgakov's widow went to the granite workshop and saw some old big dusty tombstone. It turned out that it was a tombstone from Gogol's grave. In honor of Gogol's centenary, it was decided to move his grave and replace the old monument with a new one. Yelena Sergeyevna remembered the entry in the writer's diary and asked that the stone be moved to Bulgakov's grave. So now he is finally covered with Gogol's overcoat. Kosygin was a Romanov. Remember the theory about Princess Anastasia Romanova, who miraculously escaped a firing squad in Yekaterinburg and resurfaced later in Berlin? I have something more interesting. Tsarevich Alexei Nikolaevich allegedly survived that horrible night too. And not just survived, but then stayed in the USSR and even managed to become one of the most prominent Soviet figures, under the name of Alexei Kosygin. Chairman of the Council of Ministers, member of the Presidium of the CPSU, twice hero of socialist labor. This legend originated from an article written in one of the magazines by historian Sergei Zhelenkov. According to his version, the Rothschilds, who were directing the Bolsheviks, decided to execute the Romanovs, but they managed to escape through a secret tunnel inside the Ipatьev's house. The passage led to the building of a nearby factory, the owner of which dug an underground passage back in 1905. By the way, when the famous Ipatьев house was demolished, a tunnel was actually discovered. The family's escape was organized by a group of officers of the Tsarist general staff. Stalin, who was a relative of the Romanovs according to Zhelenkov's version, was also aware of the operation. According to the historian's version, a special department was organized on the basis of the second main directorate of the KGB for the supervision over the Romanov children. The Bolsheviks believed that in the future the family could be used for political purposes. A dacha was built near Sukhumi, where Stalin met with his relative Nicholas. The last emperor visited Moscow from time to time and died in 1958. Tsarina Alexandra in 1948, and their son built a wonderful career in politics. Stalin promoted him, saved him from troubles and death more than once, and sometimes even called him Tsarevich. Allegedly due to his origins, Kosygin did not participate in the party struggles, retained his positions under Khrushchev and Brezhnev, and served as the head of government for 16 years. As you realize, there is no special evidence other than the article of a self-proclaimed historian, and the fact that both Alexeys were born in 1904. But the theory is amusing. Perhaps Tomorrow. Perhaps Tomorrow is a Soviet war movie created by Dmitry Dalsky and Lyudmila Snezhinsky in 1931 at the studio Ukraine Film. For many years this movie was considered lost because it was never released in the Soviet Union. Just in those years, strict censorship of cinema was introduced, which prevented such films from being released for ideological and political reasons. The movie itself told the story of how the capitalist world is in crisis, and against this background, fascists unleash a war against the Soviet Union. The enemy attack interrupts the peaceful labor of Soviet people. Hundreds of production workers join the Red Army. Red Army units, columns of tanks and units of People's Militia are leaving for the front. Enemy planes appear over the Soviet city, black smoke from bomb bursts rise. The streets are full of mournful funeral processions of the first victims of the war. At the end of the movie, a worker appears on the screen, appealing to the audience to be prepared for a war that has not yet come, but perhaps tomorrow will. Let me remind you that it was 1931, that is, Hitler had not even been appointed Chancellor of Germany yet. How could the authors of the movie have predicted everything so well? This is what gave this movie such a legendary status, as well as the fact that it was allegedly specially hidden by the secret services who did not want to allow common people to watch such a prophetic movie in cinemas. But it all sounds rather dull. It is a lost movie. Who is going to check whether it really had such a pathetic plot? But the most important thing in this story is that the movie was found. In 2022 it was found in the archives of Gosfilmofond of the Russian Federation, digitized and posted on YouTube, in Ukrainian only though. And everyone can see that even 10 years before the Great Patriotic War, the filmmakers predicted it with frightening accuracy. And that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Like last time, this level will be divided into 3 parts, so stay tuned. And as always, a huge shout out to my biggest supporters: Елизавета Zakharova, Kirill Klimuk, Simon Berza, Jimmy Albin, Eli, Petr Ilich and Bruce Etsunik. See you guys next time.